You came to kill my daughter? Domestic violence? I wish I knew it was going on before yesterday.
It was a Sunday morning in North St. Louis County, Mother's Day weekend. The kind of morning where families sleep in a little late, where kids make plans to go to church, where the smell of breakfast drifts through the house and the world, just for a moment, feels safe. But on the 10700 block of Wurdack Avenue, safety was about to become a memory. By 9:30 that morning, a mother would be standing in her own front yard watching her children die. 2 of them, shot down in front of her eyes, one after the other. And the man responsible had planned every single detail of what he was about to do. This is the story of Lanija Cooper and her brother, Marc Rhodes Jr., 2 young people who loved their family more than anything, who were building lives full of promise, and who were taken from this world on an ordinary Sunday morning because of one man's rage and one man's gun. Now, to understand what was lost that day, you first have to understand who these 2 people actually were, because they were not just victims. They were a daughter, a sister, a mother, a son, a brother. They were the heartbeat of a family that had already seen more than its fair share of loss. Their mother, Laura Cooper-Rhodes, was a mother of 5 children, 4 daughters and 1 son. She was the kind of mother who documented everything online: birthdays, graduations, ordinary Tuesday afternoons. If you scroll through her social media, one thing becomes very clear very fast. Her children were her entire world. Her oldest child was Lanija Cooper, born January 13th, the year 2000, right there in the St. Louis area. From the very beginning, Lanija carried herself like someone who understood what responsibility meant. She was the firstborn, and she wore that role with pride. Family members describe her as protective, nurturing, and mature beyond her years. She was the kind of big sister who did not just look out for her siblings, she helped raise them. When her mother needed a hand, Lanija was already there before she even had to ask. Then, just over 5 years later, on April 1st, 2005, Laura welcomed her first and only son into the world, Marc Rhodes Jr., and from the moment he arrived, something clicked between those 2. Lanija and Marc were not just siblings. They were best friends, completely inseparable. Where one went, the other followed. They shared secrets, dreams, inside jokes, and that unspoken understanding that only people who grow up side by side ever really develop. People who knew the family used to remark on their bond all the time. It was not just closeness. It was something deeper than that. A loyalty, a sense that whatever life threw at them, they were going to face it together. But life had a habit of throwing hard things at this family. Back in 2007, tragedy arrived early and cruelly. One of Laura's younger daughters, Lanija Rhodes, passed away at just 3 months old. No parent should ever have to bury a child. The grief of losing an infant is its own kind of devastation. Raw, silent, permanent. The family mourned deeply, but they also kept Lanjia's memory alive in the years that followed. They never let her be forgotten. Life kept moving, as it always does. Lanija and Marc grew up in St. Louis, going to school, making friends, slowly becoming the young adults their mother had raised them to be. And Lanija was something else. She was driven, creative, deeply loving. She had a passion for beauty and style. She trained as a lash technician and built herself a reputation as a hairstylist in the community. People knew her work. People sought her out. She was constructing something for herself, one client at a time, and she was proud of it. But the role that probably changed her most was becoming a mother herself. On April 27, 2021, at just 17 years old, Lanija gave birth to a son. Young, yes, but everyone who watched her step into that role says she did it without hesitation. Her son was her everything. Her social media became a window into that love. Birthday parties, silly everyday moments, quiet evenings at home. She showed up for that little boy every single day. Then came June 3rd, 2023, and that date carried 2 very different meanings at the same time. It was Lanija's high school graduation, a milestone she had worked hard for, that her mother had prayed for, that her siblings were out there cheering for. In a video from that day, you can hear the pure joy in Laura's voice. She is teasing her daughter, laughing, beaming. "That's my daughter," she says, like she almost cannot believe it. But June 3rd was also the anniversary of baby Lanjia's passing. And rather than set that grief aside on her own big day, Lanija carried it with her. She organized a balloon release at the cemetery. She celebrated her own future while honoring the little sister she never really got to know. That choice tells you everything about who Lanija was. She never left the people she loved behind, not even the ones she had already lost. Meanwhile, Marc Rhodes Jr. was becoming his own person. He was 19 years old by the time of his death, a young man full of energy and loyalty. He had turned 18 the April before, and his mother had shared a heartfelt post celebrating him that day. The kind of message a proud parent writes when they look at their child and just feel overwhelmed by love. Marc had that effect on people. He was protective, especially when it came to his sisters, his family, and that protectiveness, as beautiful as it was, would ultimately cost him his life. Now, before we get to what happened on that Sunday morning, we need to talk about what this family had already been through, because this is important context. The Cooper-Rhodes family was not unfamiliar with grief. They had been rebuilding themselves from loss over and over again for years. The most crushing blow before 2024 came on December 29, 2022. That was the day Marc and Lanija's father, Marc Rhodes Sr., died in a crash involving a police vehicle. He was 40 years old. The crash happened just one day after his own birthday. He was gone before any of them had time to process it. Even though Laura and Marc Sr. were no longer together, he was still the father of her oldest children. He was still the man Marc Jr. had been named after. He was still someone Lanija had known her entire life. His death hit that family like a second earthquake arriving before the first one had even fully settled. But they held each other up. They leaned on one another. They kept going, because that is what families do. By April of 2024, things were beginning to feel, cautiously, like they might be turning around. Lanija's little boy turned 3 years old. The family gathered to celebrate. Balloons, cake, photos, laughter. Ordinary joy, the kind that matters most. And then, right around that same time, Marc Sr.'s father passed away. Another funeral. Another goodbye. Still, they kept pushing forward. What none of them knew, what none of them could possibly have known, was that the worst was still ahead of them. And it was coming fast. Now let me tell you about the man who came to their door that morning. His name was Lamarr Harris, 19 years old. He lived in Florissant, Missouri, just a few miles from the Cooper-Rhodes family home. At some point before the spring of 2024, Lamarr and Lanija had been in a relationship together. It ended, as many young relationships do. But unlike most breakups, this one left behind a tension that never cooled. According to investigators, problems between the two did not go away after the relationship was over. Then came Saturday night, May 4, 2024. According to police, Lamarr became convinced that Lanija had gone out the night before and slashed the tires on his new girlfriend's car. Now we do not know for certain how he reached that conclusion. We do not know whether the accusation was even true. What we do know is that he believed it. And more dangerously, he made a decision to act on that belief. Investigators say that as Saturday turned into Sunday, Lamarr's anger did not cool down. It got hotter. Instead of sleeping on it, instead of letting it go, instead of calling a friend and talking it through, he made a choice. He armed himself with a .40 caliber handgun. And then he arranged a ride. Not his own car. A Lyft. A rideshare. He opened the app, put in the address, and ordered a car to take him to the home where Lanija and Marc lived. Now I want you to sit with that detail for a second, because it matters. Using a rideshare meant Lamarr had time to think about what he was doing. From the moment he ordered that car, to the moment it arrived, to the entire ride over to Wurdack Avenue, there were multiple opportunities to stop. Multiple moments where he could have changed his mind and gone home. He did not take any of them. He showed up at the Cooper-Rhodes home just after 9:30 in the morning. Laura was there. Lanija was there. Marc was there. He had been planning to go to church with his mother that day. He never left that yard alive. When Lamarr Harris arrived at the front door of that home on Wurdack Avenue that morning, it was completely unexpected. He was not invited. There was no arrangement to meet. He simply appeared, with a loaded gun on him and a decision already made in his head. Words were exchanged almost immediately. Tensions rose fast. And Marc Rhodes Jr. did what Marc Rhodes Jr. always did when his family was threatened. He stepped forward. He was not going to stand there and watch someone come to his home and disrespect his sister. That was not who he was. According to court documents, during that confrontation, Marc punched Lamarr in the face. For just the briefest moment, it might have looked like a fist fight. The kind that ends with somebody walking away angry. maybe with a bruised jaw, and nothing more. But Lamarr Harris did not walk away. The court documents say that immediately after being struck, Lamarr reached for the weapon he had brought with him, the .40 caliber handgun, and he opened fire on Marc Rhodes Jr. Marc was hit multiple times. This 19-year-old young man who had just been planning to go to church that morning collapsed right there in the yard. But Lamarr was not finished. Lanija Cooper had just watched her brother get shot. She tried to run. She tried to get away, find cover, survive. A neighbor who witnessed part of the scene later told reporters she tried to hide near some bushes along the edge of the property. Lamarr went after her. He chased her down and kept shooting. And Cooper-Rhodes saw all of it. She was standing right there. She watched her son get shot. She watched her daughter get shot. And there was nothing in the world she could do to stop any of it. Within moments, both of her children were gone, lying just steps apart from each other, on the ground in front of their own home. Neighbors started calling 911 almost immediately. The sound of gunfire had ripped through that quiet residential block. 8 shots in total, witnesses later said, fired in 2 separate bursts. People looked out windows. Some ran toward the noise. One neighbor told reporters he rushed over and tried to help. By the time he got there, it was already too late. He said both siblings had been shot in the side, in their organs. There was nothing anyone could do. Officers arrived at approximately 9:30 that morning. What they found was one of the most devastating scenes many of them would ever work in their careers. 2 young people, a brother and a sister, shot dead in their own front yard. Their mother standing nearby, in a state of shock so deep it barely has a name. Marc Rhodes Jr. and Lanija Cooper were both pronounced dead at the scene. Now there are moments in stories like this where the words of the people left behind cut through everything else. Through the police reports, the court filings, the careful language of investigators. And they just land somewhere in your chest that does not go away. Cooper-Rhodes gave an interview in the hours after her children were killed. She was standing near the very spot where her son and daughter had fallen. And she spoke.
You came to kill my daughter? Domestic violence? I wish I knew it was going on before yesterday.
And then she said this. Domestic violence. I wish I knew it was going on before yesterday. Read that again. I wish I knew it was going on before yesterday. She did not know. She did not know the extent of what had been happening between her daughter and this young man. She did not know what tensions had been building in the background. And by the time she found out, it was already too late to do anything about it. Her children were already gone. Now let us talk about what happened after the shooting, because Lamarr Harris did not stay at that scene. He tried to leave the same way he arrived, by rideshare. He had already arranged another pickup to get himself out of the area. Police believe this was deliberate. He had planned not just the crime, but the escape. It did not work. Officers responding to the scene received witness information quickly. People had seen him. They had descriptions. And when police spotted a rideshare vehicle behaving in a way that caught their attention, they pulled it over. Lamarr Harris was inside. He was taken into custody without any major incident. Within hours of shooting 2 people to death in front of their own mother, he was in handcuffs. The following day, charges were filed. Lamarr Harris was charged with second-degree murder and armed criminal action in connection with the death of Marc Rhodes Jr. Charges related to Lanija's death were taken under advisement at that time, which simply means prosecutors were continuing to build that portion of the case. He was held on a $750,000 cash-only bond, not 10%, the full amount. He remained in custody. The probable cause statement released to the public was brutally clear about what happened. It confirmed that Harris had been in a prior romantic relationship with Lanija, that he had suspected her of slashing his new girlfriend's tire the night before, that he had taken a Lyft to the family home with a loaded firearm, that Marc had punched him, and that immediately after being struck, Harris drew his weapon and fired. That sequence is important. He did not pull that gun because he feared for his life. He had come to that house already armed, already angry, already decided. When Marc hit him, it gave him a moment to act on what he had already planned. And that is what he did. A neighbor who saw part of what happened told reporters he did it and then had a rideshare ready to get out of there and try to vanish. But the cops saw him getting into a car, thought something was off, and pulled it over. The driver was stopped right along with him. He had planned his exit, and he still got caught. In the days that followed, Wurdack Avenue changed. That quiet residential block became a memorial. Flowers appeared, candles, balloons, cards left by people who had never even met Marc or Lanija but felt the weight of what had happened there. Through all of it, the most pressing immediate concern was Lanija's 3-year-old son, now a little boy without a mother, too young to fully understand why she was not coming home. He had just had his 3rd birthday only days before she was killed. There are photos from that birthday. Lanija smiling, her son laughing. Pure, ordinary joy. And now those photos are something else entirely. Now here is the part of this story that we need to sit with, because what happened on Wurdack Avenue was not just a murder. It was a domestic violence homicide. 2 of them. Marc Rhodes Jr. did not die because of anything he did wrong. He died because he loved his sister and stepped in to protect her. He was collateral damage in the most heartbreaking sense of that phrase. He did exactly what any devoted brother would do, and it killed him. Experts on domestic violence also point to something that is critically important to understand. One of the most dangerous moments for any victim is right after a breakup. The period immediately following a separation is statistically one of the highest risk windows for lethal violence. When an abusive partner loses control of the relationship, some of them escalate in ways that were previously unimaginable. That is not a theoretical warning. That is exactly what played out on Wurdack Avenue. Lamarr Harris's relationship with Lanija was over. He had moved on, at least on the surface, to a new girlfriend. But the moment he felt disrespected, the moment he felt his pride and his sense of control threatened, he did not pick up the phone. He did not send a text. He did not show up to have a conversation. He armed himself, called a Lyft, and came to end her life. He was 19 years old. Marc Rhodes Jr. was 19 years old when he died. He had been planning to go to church that morning with his mother. Lanija Cooper was 20 years old. She had a 3-year-old son at home, a business she was building, a future she was working toward. They were young, impossibly young, and they died together, just the way they had lived, side by side, inseparable right up until the very end. Laura Cooper-Rhodes had already buried an infant daughter. She had already lost the father of her children in a sudden and violent crash. She had already watched her family navigate grief that most families never experience in a lifetime. And then on a Sunday morning, while her son was getting ready for church, she lost 2 more children in a matter of minutes. She is still here, still standing, still saying their names out loud, which is really the only thing left to do when the worst has already happened. As of the time this script was written, Lamarr Harris remains in the court system facing charges of murder and armed criminal action. The facts laid out in the probable cause statement, combined with the witness accounts and the physical evidence gathered at the scene, paint a picture that is extremely difficult to look away from. Marc was going to church. Lanija was home with her family. They were in their own yard, on their own street, surrounded by the people they loved. They were not doing anything wrong. They were just living their lives on a Sunday morning. And someone came to take that from them. The story of Lanija Cooper and Marc Rhodes Jr. is a story about love, about the kind of bond that exists between siblings who grow up as each other's whole world, about a young mother who was trying to build something real, about a brother who refused to stand by while someone threatened his family. But it is also a story about what happens when rage picks up a weapon, when jealousy follows someone home, when a breakup becomes a death sentence. Domestic violence does not stay behind closed doors. On May 5, 2024, it walked down a quiet residential street in North St. Louis County, knocked on a front door, and destroyed a family that had already survived so much. Lanija Cooper was 20 years old. Marc Rhodes Jr. was 19. Remember their names. And if you or someone you know is in a relationship that feels dangerous or controlling, please reach out. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.